Trump's executive order killing birthright citizenship just got blocked by a federal judge who called it blatantly unconstitutional. You got huge new fires in California just as a bombshell report exposed a colossal failure that may have killed 17 people in the Eaton fire. Trump's newest pardons and TV interview have many scared about what happens next. And if you have ADHD, you are apparently going to die much, much sooner. We're talking about all that and even more today on your brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it. But before we get into the heavy stuff, let me make a fun, lighthearted announcement. And that is that this new beautiful bastard drop this week just got even more awesome. Because in addition to us doing new limited runs of God is testing me and I refuse to study, a silly goose in this economy, and you may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you, I've gotten so many messages to re-release our old sports line, so fine, yeah, you can have it. That's the easiest way to get me to do things. Yell at me. But also, in addition to us doing a classic run of sports, for no particular reason for the next week, we're also offering special color alt versions, including blue, red, green, black, and crimson, with any and all possibly being the best damn accessory you could bring to any, I don't know, sports watching party that happens in the next few weeks. Or whenever, because sports always be sportin'. So yeah, grab any and everything you want over at beautifulbastard.com right now. But like I said, we have a lot of news to talk about today, starting with this. In big breaking news, a quickie update, a federal judge just shot down Donald Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship, with a judge who just temporarily blocked Trump's order saying, "I've been on the bench for over 4 decades. I can't remember another case where the question presented is as clear as this one. This is a blatantly unconstitutional order. There are other times in world history where we look back and people of goodwill can say, where were the judges? Where were the lawyers?" With him then asking Trump's lawyers if they think this is actually constitutional, and they said, absolutely it is. To which the judge then responded saying, "Frankly, I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar could state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles my mind." Right? And this is Trump's argument to the court, is that the children of non-citizens also shouldn't be considered citizens and therefore are not the subject of the laws of the United States. With many wondering genuinely who believes this. Does Donald Trump actually believe this? But for now, that is where we are. According to reports, the order will be blocked from taking effect for at least 2 weeks while arguments in the case play out. But also, very notably here, this lawsuit was just the first out of 22 to get a hearing, and those other challenges to the executive order will also add to the overlapping litigation as they get underway. So we're gonna have to keep our eyes on this because 1, there are a lot of moving parts, and 2, we've seen this dance before. There are gonna be so many legal battles, and this is gonna play out for a while. But then we should talk about President Trump's first interview since taking office, because it happened last night and it's blown up for a few different reasons. Starting with the fact that Trump and Hannity were discussing the last-minute preemptive pardons that Biden gave to his family members and others that he believed might be politically targeted by the new administration, like Dr. Fauci. And there we saw Trump implying that Biden had made a mistake by not pardoning himself, seemingly suggesting that he may try to prosecute the former president.
This guy went around giving everybody pardons. And you know, the funny thing, maybe the sad thing, is he didn't give himself a pardon. And if you look at it, it all had to do with him.
And then, when asked if he wanted his attorney general to investigate Biden for those preemptive pardons, Trump said that he went through 4 years of hell with his legal prosecution and added,
"It's really hard to say that they shouldn't have to go through it also. It is very hard to say that."
I'm keeping this very trim and tight, but Trump just continued on and on for a while about the pardons and Biden, and so much so that when Hannity tried to change the topic, we saw this.
They wanted to take care of it. Yeah, but Sean, they wanted to, I don't care.
They're yelling at me.
This is more important because right now the economy is going to do great.
I want to know about
I'm here, so the economy. But you have to understand, he had bad advisors on almost everything.
Additionally, here on the topic of pardons, we saw Hannity also questioning Trump about his decision to pardon almost all the people that were convicted in connection to January 6th, including those who were charged with violent offenses against police, with Trump responding,
Number one, they were in there for 3.5 years, a long time.
Right.
And in many solitary confinement, treated like nobody's ever been treated so badly. They were treated like the worst criminals in history. And you know what they were there for? They were protesting the vote because they knew the election was rigged and they were protesting the vote. And that you should be allowed to protest a vote. You should be allowed to. When the day comes...
But you shouldn't be able to invade the Capitol.
No, ready? Most of the people were absolutely innocent. Some of those people with the police, true, but they were very minor incidents, okay? They get built up by a couple of fake guys that are on CNN all the time.
Nobody watches.
They were very minor incidents.
You know, there's a few things to note about that clip. First of all, while Trump has blanket defended the people charged in connection to the insurrection countless times before, this really does go beyond what we've seen. You've got people saying, to be clear, this is the President of the United States explicitly saying that the insurrection is a form of protest that should be allowed and that the acts of violence against police taken that day were not serious offenses. I mean, you even had Hannity pushing back at the claim that invading the Capitol is a form of protest in that clip. But also, another thing that's really notable about this clip is that it's been widely omitted from the coverage of the interview that we've seen from a number of right-leaning outlets, where we've seen numerous major papers neglecting to mention those remarks in their coverage, including the articles Fox News published on their digital site. And more interestingly with Fox is while they did upload the clip on their website, they didn't include it on any of the 4 videos spanning nearly 40 minutes of content that they posted to YouTube. But then, you know, going back to the interview, there were some other key moments that came, like when Trump was discussing federal aid for recent natural disasters, and specifically the fires in California and the hurricane that devastated North Carolina and other parts of the South. And there we saw Hannity asking this question about federal aid to California.
Should the money be contingent on them practicing the science of forestry?
Well, I think this. I'm going to put a statement out today, I think, and maybe it's already written. I said, I don't think we should give California anything until they let water flow down into their state.
From the north to the south.
This is a political thing. I don't know what it is. You know, they talk about the Delta smelt. It's a little tiny fish like this.
I went out.
They say it's an endangered species. Well, how is it endangered? No wonder it's endangered. It's not getting any water.
Now with that, what I do have to note here is that those claims that Donald Trump is making, they're completely false, but he just keeps repeating them even after they've been widely debunked. But as we've talked about on the show, while the Delta smelt has become a conservative talking point, local officials have repeatedly said that conservation efforts for the fish had nothing to do with the hydrants running out of water, right? They have made clear that there were so many fires that the municipal water system, which wasn't designed to fight fires, simply couldn't meet the demand needed. Which, a big key thing is that many experts have also said that would be true of any municipal water system in the United States trying to combat a blaze at that scale. And then, as far as his claims about California officials blocking water from the north from going to the south, that's just not how the system reportedly works, with the Washington Post, for example, explaining Los Angeles does not get its water from the Northern California systems Trump described, and water experts have repeatedly explained that the scale and severity of the South California fires was not caused by empty reservoirs or a lack of water flowing from Northern California. And again, with all this, I will stress this. That is not to say that there were not major leadership issues during those fires. And in fact, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But still, I have to stress here, do not let all these falsehoods distract you from the substance here, which is that Donald Trump is threatening to withhold federal aid to California or make a condition. Right? That is a move that would be a massive change from how the federal government normally responds to natural disasters. With many also noting here that recent hurricane aid that went to mostly GOP-led states was passed by Congress without conditions. Also, while we're here on the topic of federal disaster relief, another part of this whole interview that's been widely talked about were Trump's comments bashing FEMA.
FEMA is a whole nother discussion because all it does is complicate everything. FEMA has not done their job for the last 4 years. You know, I had FEMA working really well. We had hurricanes in Florida. We had Alabama, tornadoes. But unless you have certain types of leadership, it gets in the way. And FEMA is going to be a whole big discussion very shortly because I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems. If they have a tornado someplace and if they let that state. Oklahoma is very competent. I love Oklahoma. But you know what? If they get hit with a tornado or something, let Oklahoma fix it. You don't need. And then the federal government can help them out with the money.
Though also with that, Trump didn't elaborate on his plans to reform or abolish FEMA yet. But then the final moment that we're going to hit on from this interview are Donald Trump making comments about TikTok when Hannity asked him about China and privacy concerns. Because there we saw Trump making, we'll call it an interesting new argument.
Those that say they know say it's a spying app for the communist Chinese.
But you can say that about everything made in China. Look, we have our telephones made in China for the most part. We have so many things made in China, so why don't they mention that, you know?
Let me get to some
The interesting thing with TikTok, though, is you're dealing with a lot of young people, so
they love it.
Is it that important for China to be spying on young people, on young kids watching crazy videos and things?
I don't want China spying on anybody.
No, but they make your telephones and they make your computers and they make a lot of other things. Isn't that a bigger threat?
Right, and so with that, you had a number of people arguing that this is a weird pivot for Trump, saying, you know, he's going from everything China does is evil, I will stop them at all costs, to, well, they're already spying on us through our computers and other stuff, so, you know, why start with TikTok. And so yeah, understandably, there are a lot of people talking about numerous aspects here. Of course, I'd love to know any and all thoughts you have on the highlights here. And also, if you want to watch more of the interview, I'll link you in the description. But then to shift to different news, we should talk about Donald Trump's newest pardons getting a lot of attention because he just issued full and unconditional pardons to 2 DC police officers convicted in connection to the cover-up of a young black man's death in 2020. Right, so all of this, it goes back to October 23rd, 2020, which notably was 5 months after the killing of George Floyd, which kind of sets the scene for you, and that's when Officer Terrence Sutton and Lieutenant Andrew Zabowski conducted what federal prosecutors described as an unjustified, illegal, and reckless vehicular pursuit. A pursuit where they were chasing 20-year-old Karan Hilton Brown. And according to the prosecution, Sutton and Zabowski, who were driving separate vehicles, saw Hilton Brown riding a moped on a sidewalk without a helmet, with him then reportedly ignoring the officers' attempts to stop him and drove off. And so Sutton chased him from behind while Zabowski drove on parallel streets to try and get ahead of him to cut him off. And so you had Sutton reportedly chasing Hilton Brown for 10 blocks, including at one point by driving the wrong way on a one-way street. He then reportedly pursued Hilton Brown into a narrow alley, turning off his vehicle's emergency lights and sirens and accelerating. What ended up happening is that when Hilton Brown exited the valley, he was hit by an SUV. And with all that, the video evidence reportedly showed Hilton Brown riding erratically on sidewalks and cutting in front of oncoming traffic. But also, a key thing in this case is that police department policy prohibited officers from chasing a motorist merely because of a traffic violation, right? Including, for example, operating a moped unsafely. But with that, we saw Sutton's attorney claiming they were pursuing Hilton Brown because he had actually been involved in a dispute earlier and they believed that he might have been going to retaliate against someone. But still for many, that didn't explain what reportedly happened next, which, according to the prosecution, was to, quote, bury all this under a rock, with a statement from the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia saying, as Mr. Hilton Brown lay unconscious in the street in a pool of his own blood, Sutton and Zabowski agreed to cover up what Sutton had done to prevent any further investigation of the incident. And specifically, the prosecution says that the officers turned off their body cameras and conferred with each other, with Sutton giving the driver of the SUV permission to leave. With then, the officers reportedly failing to notify the department's major crash unit as was required or secure the crash site for evidence collection. And then finally, here, according to the prosecutors, the officers misled their shift commander by describing the crash as relatively minor, downplaying Hilton Brown's injuries and leaving out any mention of a chase. And so what we ended up seeing is Sutton and Zabowski both being convicted on charges of conspiracy and obstructing justice in 2022, and Sutton also being found guilty on second-degree murder. And for all that, they were sentenced to 66 and 48 months in prison. Though, notably, the officers had remained free pending the outcomes of their appeals. And so now, thanks to Donald Trump's pardons, they're not going to be going to jail. And with that, you have the DC Police Department thanking Donald Trump, saying in a statement, the prosecutions were literally unprecedented. Never before in any other jurisdiction in the country has a police officer been charged with second-degree murder for pursuing a suspect. And then adding, the department recognizes the risks involved in vehicle pursuits, which are reflected in our pursuit policy, but violations of that policy should be addressed through training and discipline, not through criminal prosecution. So with all this, you have a number of people questioning if Donald Trump actually had a firm grasp on the details of this case. And that because he's actually been talking about it for a few days, saying things like, they were arrested, put in jail for 5 years because they went after an illegal. They arrested the 2 officers and put them in jail for going after a criminal, a rough criminal, by the way. And finally, I am the friend of police more than any president who's ever been in this office. Which I will say, there's just like 2 or maybe 3 or actually 4 things we need to talk about. Right? 1, as mentioned, those officers, they were not put in jail for 5 years. They were out on bail pending appeal. 2, Hilton Brown was reportedly just an African-American citizen, not an undocumented immigrant. 3, people have pushed back saying while Hilton Brown may have been breaking the law, according to court records, he didn't have any adult felony cases. Or with a number of people saying the only people actually convicted of crimes here were the police officers being pardoned. And then 4, I mean, as far as Donald Trump being a friend of the police, I feel like that is very complicated. But on one hand, a lot of police officers are actually reportedly outraged about Trump's pardoning of January 6th rioters, with even the Fraternal Order of Police, the largest police union in the United States, which actually endorsed Trump in the election, saying in a statement, allowing those convicted of these crimes to be released early diminishes accountability and devalues the sacrifices made by courageous law enforcement officers and their families. But then, on the other hand, along with pardoning police officers convicted of crimes, it appears that he may be making big changes to the Department of Justice that could undo a lot of the Biden-era efforts of police reform. Or just today, for example, there being a memo saying the department's Civil Rights Division must now notify the DOJ's new chief of staff of any so-called consent decrees, which the division has finalized within the last 90 days. And there you have many saying that this directive suggests that police reform agreements negotiated with cities like Minneapolis and Louisville, they may be in jeopardy. And then secondly, here, Trump's DOJ has reportedly ordered its Civil Rights Division to halt ongoing investigative activity and not pursue new indictments, cases, or settlements. With this freeze, reportedly meant to be, quote, consistent with the department's goal of ensuring that the federal government speaks with one voice in its view of the law. And notably, while the freeze could affect efforts aimed at accountability and law enforcement, the Civil Rights Division deals with a lot more crap than that. I mean, even just in the last week of Biden's presidency, you had them suing an Iowa landlord for sexually harassing tenants, getting sentences for human smugglers and money launderers, and going after states for discriminating against people with physical disabilities. Which is why, among other things, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when this freeze ends. With all that, I do feel like I should know that, according to outlets like the Washington Post, for example, the Civil Rights Division typically experiences the biggest shift in priorities between Republican and Democratic administrations. So even with that being understood, DOJ officials interviewed since the election reportedly expect the differences to be even more drastic this time around. And then we'll get right back to the news in a minute, but first, there's been buzz about the many benefits of colostrum, and I gotta tell you, I'm sold. And specifically, I am sold on the effects I get from our sponsor, ARMRA colostrum, right? It's this one jar, it has one ingredient and over 1,000 benefits. Or the way that I think about it is that colostrum is basically nature's OG superfood. It's this crazy nutrient-packed whole food produced by all mammals in the first 48 to 72 hours after birth. Think peptides, antibodies, antioxidants, everything your body needs to thrive. And ARMRA colostrum is a physician-founded brand that's optimized this powerhouse for humans. They deliver over 400 functional nutrients in a super digestible form that supports your gut, immune system, cells, and honestly, way more than I can list here. And what's cool is how it works. It strengthens your body's natural defense system against environmental junk. And I've noticed my immune system staying strong, even with my kids constantly bringing home, things that they get from being kids. And added bonus, I've noticed leaner muscle mass, decreased muscle soreness, and overall quicker workout recovery. And I'm not saying that just so I can include this clip, or maybe that's 10% of the reason. I just pour this into cold water, sip, enjoy, and let it go to work. You can also just pour the powder directly into your mouth if you want. So hey, go to tryarmra.com/DeFranco and level up your health and use code DeFranco at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. But then in some other really big news, we need to talk about not only now the third major wildfire to ravage Los Angeles, but the potentially scandalous revelations coming out about one of the others. So first up, I'll say that everyone was holding their breath last night watching the so-called Hughes fire rage out of control, with it reportedly igniting Wednesday morning near Castaic Lake, about 40 miles northwest of downtown LA. With it so far, thankfully, reportedly only burning through mostly shrub and grassland, as well as some forest, and not damaging any buildings. But what was really frightening people with it was the staggering speed in which it exploded, because in just a few hours, it reportedly consumed over 10,000 acres of land, which, to try to put that into perspective, it's been 2 weeks since the Palisades and Eaton fires broke out, and they've chewed through roughly 23,000 and 14,000 acres respectively. Also, speaking of those two, as of Wednesday, fire crews said that the Palisades fire was 70% contained and the Eaton fire was 95% contained. But as of Thursday morning, this Hughes fire was only 14% contained according to the fire crews. And so with this, we've seen the authorities issuing mandatory evacuation orders for some 31,000 people and evacuation warnings for another 21,000 in Los Angeles and Ventura counties, as well as temporarily shutting down parts of Interstate 5, or for my Californians, the 5. So naturally, you have people looking at that and wondering, if 10,000 acres can just erupt in a matter of hours, who's to say the next inferno won't suddenly pop up on me? Right? Especially as you have the National Weather Service warning that wind gusts of up to 65 miles per hour could cause new or existing fires to grow quickly, which I will say could have happened near the 405 and the Getty Museum late Wednesday with a new brush fire engulfing 40 acres. But luckily there, you have the authorities saying that an aggressive early response with fire crews, with air support, it halted its progress by this morning, allowing evacuation warnings to be lifted. Though I will say, it does appear that there may be some more good news on the horizon, right? And that is because you have forecasters apparently optimistic about the next few days, because after 9 months of no significant rainfall in Southern California, rain is projected for this weekend. With us now seeing a meteorologist saying that there is a 60 to 80% chance of thunderstorms to be expected on Saturday, which could bring up to 2 inches of rainfall. But because apparently we can never have just good news, this meteorologist also said that while the rain might relieve firefighters, it also brings a slight chance of flash floods and toxic debris flows in burned areas. So also a big thing here is that if the rainfall this weekend disappoints, it could be 2 to 4 weeks before the next chance of significant rain, according to another expert. With them also adding there, if that rainfall doesn't pan out, we're potentially looking at dry conditions well into the month of March. But with all that, as the largest blazes are coming under control and we're hoping for the best, we're also learning more about what happened or what should have happened but didn't during those initial days. With us seeing most of the scrutiny right now pointed at the response to the Eaton fire, which has reportedly killed a confirmed 17 people. And that because if you look at this map of where those deaths occurred, you'll notice that every single one of them was in one particular neighborhood in Western Altadena. And if the reports coming out right now are true, that may not be a coincidence. We know that the blaze spilled out of Eaton Canyon on the evening of Tuesday, January 7th, and by that night, other neighborhoods in Eastern Altadena and surrounding areas like Pasadena got evacuation warnings and orders. But according to records now reviewed by the New York Times and the LA Times, the parts of Altadena west of North Lake Avenue, they never got an evacuation warning. And reportedly, the residents only got an evacuation order on their phones at 3:25 Wednesday morning. And this, as some, like those on the 800 block of East Sacramento Street, where at least one person died, reportedly didn't get orders until 5:50. Which, understand, by that time, the flames were already on top of many homes, and for some, it was just too late. Which again, if true, is crazy, because there were radio reports of fires in the area as early as 11 p.m. the previous night, according to public records. And by 2 a.m., witnesses said LA County Sheriff's deputies were driving down streets and urging urging people to evacuate using loudspeakers. So there we saw one woman telling the LA Times, "I was outside and I could barely make out what they were saying because of the wind." And although some people evacuated on their own after seeing an orange glow on the horizon, others stayed put, trusting the system. And with that, we hear stories like this one woman who told the outlet that she and her husband went to sleep at around 10 p.m. knowing, hey, our home's not in the evacuation zone, but then she woke up at 2:20 to the feeling of smoke filling her lungs. With her recalling, we were 100% alone. There was no system to alert people, and adding, we're all recounting, oh my God, we weren't on the evacuation map. We didn't hear any sirens or any people telling us to leave. And saying whoever was managing the maps or managing the comms was not on their game. Now with all that, as far as what apparently went wrong here, we need to wait for more information to come out, but you did have the Office of Emergency Management saying, while we cannot immediately comment on all factors leading to the tragic loss of life, once the immediate wildfire crisis has passed, there will be a comprehensive third-party evaluation of all response efforts. And they are saying this review will focus on identifying areas of strength and pinpointing opportunities for improvement, ensuring we are prepared to respond to future emergencies. So we'll have to wait to see what comes from that and if more information comes out, but also it's just insane to think that as many as 17 out of the 28 lives lost to these wildfires so far, they might still be here if things went just a little bit differently. But then, shifting to some health and life news, if you have ADHD, you are going to die sooner, earlier, maybe even right now. Okay, good, that one wasn't you. At least, that's what we're seeing from this new study that was just published in the British Journal of Psychiatry that found, on average, people with ADHD, right, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, die sooner than those without it. When I say sooner, I don't mean like by a little bit. We're talking about a significant margin. This study says that, on average, men with ADHD die around 7 years earlier and women with ADHD roughly 9 years earlier. And notably, this is a pretty massive study with them examining over 9.5 million patients in Britain's National Health Service primary care practices. And of all the patients, just over 30,000 were diagnosed with ADHD. And another big thing is that a senior author on this study said that it is unlikely that ADHD itself is the actual cause of these premature deaths. Rather, what they said they found was that those with ADHD are twice as likely as the general population to smoke and abuse alcohol. And that's in addition to them also finding that they were far more likely to have autism, self-harming behaviors, and personality disorders. With Joshua Stott, a professor of aging and clinical psychology at University College London and a senior author on this study, saying that adults with ADHD find it harder to manage impulses and have more risky behaviors. With then Dr. Stott also adding, it's a big number and it is worrying. I see it as likely to be more about health inequality than anything else, but it's quite a big health inequality. Also, I do think that it's very much worth noting that the team also offered some words of caution regarding their findings, with them noting that ADHD is seriously underdiagnosed and that the people in their study may be among the most severely affected. They're saying that their results could be overestimates. Also, I want to say, while this study is the first of its kind for how they came to these conclusions, it's not entirely the first to do it. For example, a 2022 meta-analysis in JAMA Pediatrics found that deaths from unnatural causes like accidents or suicide were nearly 3 times higher for those with ADHD, as well as there being a 2019 study that concluded that adults diagnosed with ADHD as children, they had a life expectancy that was just over 8 years shorter than the general population. With the saying Russell Barkley, who was the lead author on that 2019 study, saying that the data made it clear that ADHD is a lifelong issue, not just a childhood problem, and added, to me, the best analog is diabetes. This is a disorder that you've got to manage, like high blood pressure, like cholesterol and diabetes. You've got to treat this for life. But here and now, we have Dr. Stott saying that with a greater understanding of ADHD, he hopes that healthcare systems will make more of an effort to accommodate the needs of neurodivergent people. Or with him noting that people with ADHD, they may struggle with sensory sensitivity or time management or communicating with clinicians. And then, going even further, saying he hopes that substance abuse treatment can be adapted for people with ADHD. Saying, if it's about systems, it's malleable. This doesn't have to be. But yeah, anyway, this has been another fun edition of Fun Facts with Phil. And yeah, of course, I'd love everyone's opinions and thoughts and reactions to any of the news I covered today. With this one, I'd especially love, if you have ADHD, what you think, especially because we know that you are apparently on the clock right now. But then, to shift gears to international news, we need to talk about Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, and the United States. Right in that, because according to Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, the Israeli army is now applying lessons that they learned in Gaza and the West Bank. And notably, he's saying that as the IDF is still carrying out what has been described by Netanyahu as a large-scale and significant military operation in the city of Jenin. And so with that, we'll also have to talk about how this got started, where we are now, and also, because of the timing of all this, what Donald Trump and the United States has to do with everything. So to go back a little, America and American-made weapons obviously played a role in Gaza, but on Sunday we saw an Israeli-Hamas ceasefire partly mediated by the US going into effect, with then Donald Trump on Monday coming back into the presidency. And since then, of course, a lot of the media attention has been away from the Middle East, and specifically on Donald Trump doing what's been described by many as testing the limits of presidential power. But notably, something that was connected is that one of his day one executive actions was lifting sanctions against Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank, with the key thing there being that those sanctioned were individuals and groups accused of perpetuating violence against Palestinians. Right, in the broader context here, Israeli Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are illegal under international law and seen as a major land grab by Palestinians. But notably, the current Israeli government has encouraged the practice to varying degrees, and in fact, over the course of the war in Gaza, there has been especially significant settlement expansion. There's also been an uptick in settler violence since at least 2022 when, in the words of the Wall Street Journal, Netanyahu established the most right-wing, religious, and ultra-nationalist coalition in Israeli history. Although again, we've seen escalation since October 7th, with reportedly entire villages getting displaced for the first time. And connected to that, we've seen Israeli, Palestinian, and international rights groups saying only a fraction of settler violence results in convictions, and in fact, Israeli soldiers, some of whom are themselves settlers, sometimes even taking part. So then, something else we've seen connected to that is that Trump's return to the White House has been welcomed by hardline pro-settler ministers who have pledged to even further expand settlement building. And in fact, on top of lifting sanctions, he appointed several senior officials with close ties to the settler movement. Right, Trump's pick for UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik, she said she agreed with the view of far-right Israeli ministers who believe Israel has a biblical right to the entire West Bank. And this is just this week, we've seen a flare-up in settler violence starting even before Trump lifted the sanctions, with reports coming out saying dozens of masked men, some reportedly armed with rifles and Molotov cocktails, descended on Palestinian villages, breaking windows and setting houses and cars on fire, with then 21 Palestinians reportedly being injured there. And with that, an attack on one village was seen as a retaliation to an incident earlier this month where 3 Israeli settlers were killed. But also, notably, the broader violence has been seen as a response to the agreement between Israel and Hamas, with the seeing outlets reporting that Israelis went on WhatsApp and other messaging platforms urging people to protest the ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners. With that then eventually escalating to calls for violence, and then the violence finally broke out on Sunday and Monday night. So what we saw in response is you had the Palestinian Authority condemning the attack and saying, "We call on the new American administration to intervene to stop these crimes and Israeli policies that will not bring peace and security to anyone." And this is at the same time you had Hamas calling on Palestinians to escalate resistance against settlements in the West Bank. With it then, not long after, just a few hours after Trump lifted the sanctions, that the Israeli military operation began in Jenin, which notably has long been an epicenter of militant Palestinian resistance, including Iran-backed groups like Hamas. And there, I will say, Israel has conducted these types of raids in the West Bank, specifically on Jenin, many times before. And also, a big thing is that Israel isn't the only one, right? Over the past few weeks, for example, it's been raided by the Palestinian Authority, which is led by a party that sees Hamas as something of a rival. But in any case, right, with all this, you have Israel framing the current operation as part of its larger struggle against Iran. With seeing, for example, Defense Minister Katz saying, "We will not allow the arms of the Iranian regime and radical Sunni Islam to endanger the lives of settlers and establish a terrorist front east of the state of Israel," with then reportedly 10 Palestinians being killed in the initial offensive, and then 2 more men being killed today that the Israeli military claimed were involved in that attack earlier this month, where 3 Israeli settlers were killed. With then, reportedly on top of that, thousands being forced to flee Jenin refugee camp, which, is already home to Palestinians descended from those who fled or were driven from their homes following the creation of Israel. But ultimately, with everything we're talking about here, it ends up being a waiting game, right? We're gonna have to wait to see what happens, 1, with this operation, and then 2, just generally where things go with the entire West Bank, and then 3, what happens with a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. But then, finally today, let's talk about yesterday and some commentary brought to you by BeautifulBastard.com, the most comfortable way to wear your feelings. Where, in addition to the fantastic new stuff we just dropped, we also have some discounts on site, so definitely check it out. But y'all, diving into those comments yesterday, not a surprise, there were a lot of comments about Donald Trump and Bishop Buddy, with the most liked comment yesterday reading, "Honestly, if there was ever going to be hard proof that Jesus Christ would be hated by most modern Christians, this situation with the bishop just proved it." But we saw a lot of comments like that. Quote, "Jesus said love one another, and I took that personally." Within some responding, Leviticus 19:33-34, New International Version, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Though then, that person also wrote, "Granted, this is the book about laying with man as one would with a woman, so maybe only half the book is biblically acceptable." Meanwhile, you people like Sweet saying, "I watched the clip of the bishop multiple times. What fascinated me the most was everyone around Trump. The continued side eye, the glance to him to see how they should be responding to this. Every one of them multiple times checked in to make sure their reaction was the correct reaction." You also had plenty of folks like Ed saying, "Guy literally just said he's bringing back freedom of speech and then immediately takes offense and wants an apology from someone exercising that freedom." You also had plenty of people just sharing that they were very impressed with Bishop Buddy, saying, "Wow, an actual religious leader with both compassion and a spine. I'm very impressed. I hope she's protected." Saying her speaking up for the helpless and scared with a message of kindness and compassion is exactly what Jesus would do and what he would want the people that speak in his name to do. And notably, the comments included religious and non-religious people alike, with some sharing, "I'm not a religious person and I often don't agree with some major religious teachings," but then adding, "That bishop is now one of my heroes. Her bravery to ask the president to show mercy to those who deserve it make her one of my favorite people, and I believe that's exactly what religion should represent." But that, my friends, is where your Thursday evening, Friday morning dive into the news is going to end today. Of course, remember, yes, you get a brand new Philip DeFranco show every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. But also, be sure to follow me on my socials listed here. I also got links in the description. With how fast the news has been moving recently, I've been posting way more videos on social media just to try to keep people up to date. But as far as these big, meaty Philip DeFranco shows, thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.